Growing up in the Mitchell family, I always knew I was different. While my cousins got the best rooms during our annual summer reunions, I was relegated to sleeping bags in basements or, in the worst case, a makeshift bed in my uncle's musty garage. Back then, I thought it was normal, just the price of being the youngest cousin. Little did they know that 20 years later, I'd be the owner of a stunning beachfront property in Malibu, the same property they're now desperately asking to use for their family reunion. Funny how life works out, isn't it? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. My name is Ethan Mitchell, and I grew up in a large extended family in suburban Chicago. My mom, Diane, was the youngest of 4 siblings, and consequently, I was the youngest of all 12 cousins. Every summer since I was 5, the entire Mitchell clan would gather at one of my uncle's vacation homes for a 2-week family reunion. The hierarchy in our family was always crystal clear. My Uncle Richard, the oldest sibling and a successful orthopedic surgeon, called all the shots. His 3 kids, Travis, Megan, and Amber, always got the best rooms. Then came Uncle Peter's family, followed by Aunt Catherine's brood, and lastly, my mom and I at the bottom of the food chain. My mom had married young to my dad, Alex, who was an aspiring musician. When I was just 3, he left us to pursue his dreams in Nashville, leaving my mom to raise me on her teaching salary. The rest of the family never let us forget that we were the struggling members of the Mitchell clan. During one particularly memorable reunion at Uncle Richard's lake house in Wisconsin when I was 14, we arrived a day late because my mom couldn't get time off work immediately. By the time we got there, all the rooms had been assigned. Uncle Richard approached us with that fake sympathetic smile I'd grown to despise. "Diane, honey, we've hit a bit of a space issue," he said, putting his arm around my mom's shoulders. "The kids have taken all the bedrooms, and Catherine and Peter are in the guest rooms." My mom, always trying to be agreeable, nodded understandingly. "That's okay, Rich. Ethan and I can bunk on the pull-out couch in the living room." Uncle Richard cleared his throat. "Well, that's the thing. Linda's parents decided to join us at the last minute, and they've got the pull-out." I watched my mom's face fall slightly before she covered it with a smile. "Oh, no problem. Where do you want us then?" That's when he pointed toward the detached garage. "There's plenty of space in there. I cleaned it out earlier, put down some sleeping bags. It's not so bad, and it's just for 2 weeks." I'll never forget the humiliation on my mom's face, mixed with resignation. She just nodded and said, "Of course, that's fine." It wasn't fine. The garage was hot during the day and freezing at night. It smelled like motor oil and lawn equipment. There was no bathroom, so we had to walk across the yard to use the one in the house, which was especially fun at 2 a.m. Spiders and moths were our constant companions, but my mom insisted we make the best of it because family is family. During the day, I tried to hang out with my cousins, but the age gap and their cliquish behavior left me feeling like an outsider. Travis, who was 4 years older than me, made it his mission to remind me of my place in the family hierarchy. "Hey, garage boy, did you sleep well with the power tools?" he'd ask loudly at breakfast, making everyone laugh. Even the adults would chuckle, as if my discomfort was just a cute joke. One evening, I overheard Uncle Richard talking to my mom as they were preparing dinner. "You know, Diane, if you had stuck with college instead of running off with that musician, you might have a nice vacation home by now, too," he said, not unkindly, but with that patronizing tone he reserved just for her. Some of us made responsible choices. My mom just stirred the pasta sauce quietly. "We're doing okay, Rich." "Of course you are," he replied, patting her shoulder. "And we're always happy to have you and Ethan join us, even if the accommodations are a bit rustic." I slipped away before they noticed me, my blood boiling. That night in our sleeping bags, I whispered to my mom, "Why do we keep coming to these reunions? They treat us like we're charity cases." My mom sighed and brushed my hair back from my forehead. Because they're family, Ethan. And family sticks together, no matter what. Someday you'll understand that it's not about the fancy houses or who sleeps where. It's about being together. But I didn't understand. And as I lay there listening to the distant laughter from the house, where everyone else was playing board games in comfortable air-conditioned rooms, I made a silent promise to myself. Someday, I would have a place of my own, a place so amazing that they'd all want to visit. And when they did, I'd remember the garage. The next morning, I woke up early and went down to the lake by myself. The sun was just rising, casting golden reflections on the water. As I sat on the dock, skipping stones across the surface, my cousin, Amber, Uncle Richard's youngest, came and sat beside me. She was the only one who ever showed me any kindness. "Sorry about the garage," she said simply. "Dad can be a jerk sometimes." I shrugged, trying to act like it didn't bother me. "It's whatever. Not like we can afford a place like this anyway." Amber was quiet for a moment. "You know, my dad didn't always have money. His first job was delivering newspapers. He just acts like he was born successful." This was news to me. "Really?" She nodded. "Grandpa used to tell me stories before he died. Dad doesn't like to talk about it. I think that's why he's so hard on your mom, because she reminds him of where he came from." That conversation with Amber gave me a new perspective, but it didn't make sleeping in the garage any more comfortable. The next day, things went from bad to worse when a summer storm rolled in and the roof began to leak. My mom and I spent the night huddled together, trying to stay dry as water dripped onto our sleeping bags. The next morning, Uncle Richard found us shivering and damp. For a moment, I thought I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. "Diane, this is unacceptable. You two should move into the house." For a split second, I felt relief flood through me. But then he continued, "The utility room has enough space for your sleeping bags, and at least it's dry in there. The utility room, with its humming water heater and constant noise from the washing machine. A step up from the garage, but still, not a proper room." My mom thanked him like he'd offered us the master suite. That night, as I lay awake listening to the rhythmic thud of someone's laundry in the dryer, I amended my childhood promise. I wouldn't just have a nice place someday, I'd have the nicest place. And I wouldn't just succeed, I'd succeed beyond any of their expectations. High school graduation came, and despite having good grades, I couldn't afford to go to the prestigious colleges my cousins attended. There was no trust fund waiting for me, no parents to pay my tuition. Instead, I enrolled in community college while working full-time at a local tech repair shop. My family didn't hide their disappointment. At that year's reunion, held at Uncle Peter's cabin in Michigan where Mom and I slept on air mattresses in an unfinished basement, I overheard Uncle Richard telling Aunt Catherine, "Such a shame about Ethan. Smart kid but no ambition. Just like his father. If only they knew how ambitious I really was." While my cousins partied through college on their parents' dime, I was building my first app, a simple tool for small businesses to track inventory. It wasn't revolutionary, but it worked well and filled a niche. By the time I was 20, I'd sold it to a larger company for enough money to pay for my transfer to a 4-year university and have some left over. Mom was so proud, but I asked her not to tell the family. "Let them think what they want," I told her. "I'd rather surprise them later." That later came sooner than either of us expected. While still in college, I developed a new app, a social platform for creative professionals to showcase their portfolios and connect with potential clients. This time, I didn't sell. With some guidance from professors and a small business incubator, I built a company around it. By 25, I was the CEO of a successful tech startup with offices in Chicago and San Francisco. By 27, we'd gone public, and suddenly, that kid who slept in the garage was worth millions. Mom was the first person I called when the IPO went through. We did it, I told her, barely containing my excitement. No more sleeping in garages or basements. The first thing I did was buy her a beautiful house in Chicago's North Shore, the kind of neighborhood where Uncle Richard's doctor friends lived. The second thing I did was buy myself a stunning beachfront property in Malibu. 6 bedrooms, 7 bathrooms, infinity pool, private beach access, the works. It was excessive for one person, but that wasn't the point. The point was that for years, I deliberately kept a low profile within the family. I'd skip reunions, citing work commitments, which wasn't entirely untrue. Building a company took everything I had. On the rare occasions when I did see my relatives, I kept conversations about my career vague. Tech stuff, I'd say when asked. What I did and quickly change the subject. Mom respected my privacy, though I suspect she enjoyed knowing what they didn't. The family eventually caught wind that I was doing well, but the extent remained unclear until last Christmas, when Forbes included me in their 30 under 30 list, complete with a photo spread featuring me in my Malibu home. That's when the calls started coming in. The first call came from Amber, Uncle Richard's daughter, and the only cousin who had shown me kindness during those garage sleeping days. Unlike the rest of the family, we'd maintained a casual friendship over the years. "Ethan, oh my God," she exclaimed when I picked up. "I just saw you in Forbes. A beachfront mansion in Malibu? Your own company? Why didn't you ever say anything?" I couldn't help but smile at her genuine excitement. Never came up, I guess. "How are you, Amber?" A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Forget about me. I want to hear everything. The article only covered the business stuff, but that house... Wow. 6 bedrooms? Private beach? That's incredible. We caught up for almost an hour. Amber had become an elementary school teacher, following in my mom's footsteps ironically, and had married her college sweetheart. They had twin boys and lived in a modest home in suburban Wisconsin. She seemed genuinely happy for my success, without a trace of the jealousy or entitlement I'd expect from the rest of the family. "Dad nearly choked on his coffee when he saw the article," she said, laughing. "He kept saying, 'Little Ethan, the one who slept in my garage?' As if there were multiple Ethans in the family." I laughed along with her, enjoying the mental image. I bet that was something to see. You have no idea. Anyway, I'm really happy for you, Ethan. You deserve it. After we hung up, I wondered how long it would take for the others to call. The answer: less than 12 hours. Uncle Richard's number flashed on my phone the next morning. I let it go to voicemail. Then came calls from Uncle Peter, Aunt Catherine, and several cousins, all within the span of 2 days. I didn't answer any of them. Maybe it was petty, but I wasn't ready to hear their suddenly warm voices, their newfound interest in my life. Mom called me, laughing. "Your Uncle Richard showed up at my door yesterday with flowers." Flowers? In the 25 years since your father left, he's never once brought me flowers. "What did he want?" I asked, though I could guess. "To get your phone number, claiming he'd lost it. Said he wanted to congratulate his brilliant nephew on his success." She paused. "I told him you change your number frequently for security reasons, but that I'd pass along his message." "Thanks, Mom. How did that make you feel? Seeing him after he's been so condescending all these years?" She sighed. "Honestly? Vindicated. I always knew you were special, Ethan. Even when we were sleeping in that garage, I knew someday they'd all see it too." A week later, I finally answered one of Uncle Richard's calls. I was curious what approach he'd take. "Ethan, my boy." His voice boomed with a warmth that had never been directed at me before. "Been trying to reach you. How are you doing, son?" "I'm well, Uncle Richard." "How's Aunt Linda?" "She's wonderful, just wonderful." We're so proud of you, Ethan. Always knew you. Had it in you. Your mother must be over the moon. I resisted the urge to point out that he'd never expressed any faith in my abilities before. Instead, I kept the conversation polite but brief. He made vague references to catching up properly and hearing all about my business ventures, but I deflected, citing my busy schedule. Just as I was about to end the call, he cleared his throat. Actually, Ethan, there is something I wanted to discuss with you. As you know, it's almost time for our annual family reunion. And there it was, the real reason for his call. This year is special. It marks 50 years since your grandparents got married. We were thinking of doing something extraordinary to celebrate. I remained silent, waiting for him to continue. Your place in Malibu looks absolutely stunning. Perfect for a family gathering. We were hoping, the whole family was hoping, that you might consider hosting this year's reunion. It would mean so much to everyone, especially your grandmother. My grandmother passed away 3 years ago. My grandfather had been gone for 5. I let the lie hang in the air for a moment before responding. That's quite a request, Uncle Richard. Oh, it will just be for 2 weeks in July. The usual crew, me and Linda, Peter and Jessica, Catherine and Bill, your mom, of course, and all the cousins with their families. I think we're up to about 25 people now with all the spouses and kids. 25 people. In my house. For 2 weeks. The same people who had made my mother sleep in a garage, who had called me garage boy and laughed at our circumstances, who had never once reached out during my struggles through community college or the early days of my startup when I was working 18-hour days and sleeping on a futon in my office. I'll think about it, I said finally. Wonderful. That's just wonderful. We can discuss the details later. Oh, and Ethan, it really is good to reconnect. Family is family after all. Family is family. My mom's words from that night in the garage came flooding back to me. At the time, I hadn't understood her perspective. Part of me still didn't. After hanging up, I called my mom. Uncle Richard wants to have the family reunion at my place in Malibu. She was quiet for a moment. And how do you feel about that? Honestly, part of me wants to tell him to go sleep in his own garage. She laughed. That would be fair. Then, more seriously, but you're not me, Ethan. You don't have to forgive people who've hurt you just because they're family. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Over the next few days, the messages continued to pour in. Uncle Peter sent an elaborate gift basket to my office with a note expressing his immense pride in my accomplishments. Aunt Catherine emailed old family photos, including several of me as a skinny teenager looking uncomfortable at those dreaded reunions. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly wanted to connect on social media. Travis, the cousin who had coined the Garage Boy nickname, sent a particularly transparent message. Hey, cuz. Long time no talk. Been following your success from afar. So impressed. Listen, I'm launching a new investment venture and would love to pick your brain. Maybe during the reunion at your place in July, Uncle Rich said you're hosting. Epic. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I spent the following weekend in Chicago with my mom, discussing the situation over her homemade lasagna. You know, she said, refilling my wine glass, there's something liberating about watching them all scramble for your attention now. I raised an eyebrow. I thought you were the one who always said, family is family, and that we should forgive and forget. She took a sip of her wine. I did say that, didn't I? And for many years I believed it. But watching how quickly they changed their tune when they found out about your success, it's made me question some things. Like what? Like whether I taught you the right lessons. Maybe instead of telling you to accept their treatment, I should have encouraged you to demand respect. To cut ties with people who didn't value you, even if they were family. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. You taught me to be resilient and kind. Those weren't bad lessons, Mom. She smiled, maybe not. But now I'm curious. What are you going to do about the reunion? I sat back, considering the question. I'm still not sure. Part of me wants to host it, just to see their faces when they walk into my home. To watch them squirm with the knowledge that the kid they dismissed is now the one they're depending on. And the other part? The other part thinks that's petty and beneath me, that I should be the bigger person and just decline politely. Mom twirled pasta around her fork thoughtfully. What about a third option? I'm listening. Host the reunion, but on your terms. Use it as an opportunity for some, let's call it guided reflection. A slow smile spread across my face as I caught her meaning. Mom, that's brilliantly devious. I didn't know you had it in you. She winked. Where do you think you got your strategic mind from? Certainly not your father. The next day, I called Uncle Richard back. I've decided to host the reunion, I told him. Ethan, that's fantastic news. The family will be thrilled. We can start making travel arrangements right away. There are conditions, I interrupted. Conditions? He sounded confused, as if the concept of me setting boundaries was foreign to him. Yes. First, it won't be for 2 weeks. It will be 1 week only. I have business commitments I can't reschedule. Well, that's understandable. 1 week is still... Second, I'll provide the accommodations, but everyone is responsible for their own meals except for 2 family dinners. 1 when you arrive and 1 the night before you leave. That seems reasonable, although your Aunt Linda was looking forward to cooking for everyone. Third, and this is non-negotiable, room assignments will be determined by me. There was a pause. Room assignments? Ethan, surely that's not necessary. We can sort that out when we arrive like we always do. That's not how it works at my house, Uncle Richard. Those are my conditions. If they don't work for you, I completely understand. I'm sure Uncle Peter's cabin is available. Another pause, longer this time. I could almost hear him calculating whether it was worth pushing back against my demands and potentially losing access to a Malibu beachfront property for the reunion. Fine, he finally said. Your house, your rules. We're just grateful you're willing to host. Great. I'll email everyone with the details. After hanging up, I immediately began planning. My house had 6 bedrooms plus my home office, which could be converted to a 7th bedroom. That wouldn't be enough for all 25 people. Some families would need to double up, and others might find themselves with alternative sleeping arrangements. I sent out a detailed email to the entire family outlining the dates, expectations, and a request for each family unit to send me their confirmed number of attendees. The responses came flooding in immediately, all enthusiastic acceptances. Amber called me directly. Are you sure about this, Ethan? You know how overwhelming our family can be? I'm sure. Actually, I'm looking forward to it. Really? Because you sound like someone planning a bank heist, not a family gathering. I laughed. Let's just say I'm approaching this reunion with strategic intent. Uh-oh. Should I be worried? Not you, Amber. You've always been decent to me. But the others, they might find this reunion educational. In the weeks leading up to the reunion, my home became a flurry of activity. I hired a professional cleaning service, stocked the pantry and bar, and made some specific adjustments to certain areas of the house. I converted my home gym into a makeshift bedroom with air mattresses. I cleared out a section of the garage, a spacious 3-car garage with epoxy floors and climate control, and set up a couple of folding cots. I even installed a small window AC unit in the utility closet next to the water heater, just in case. My assistant Madison, who had been with me since the early startup days, raised an eyebrow as she reviewed my preparations. You're putting 3 families in actual bedrooms, 3 in converted spaces, and 1 in the garage. You're really making your uncle sleep in the garage? Poetic justice, I replied. Don't worry, it's nicer than the garage he made us sleep in. This one has air conditioning. And you don't think this will cause drama? Oh, it absolutely will. That's part of the plan. Madison shook her head. I've seen you negotiate multi-million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat. But family stuff? You're playing with fire. Sometimes a controlled burn is necessary to clear the underbrush. 2 days before the reunion, my mom arrived early to help with final preparations. As I showed her around the house and explained my room assignment strategy, she alternated between laughter and concern. Ethan, this is deliciously petty, but are you sure it's worth the inevitable blowback? I'm not doing this to be petty, Mom. I'm doing it to make a point about empathy and perspective. If they can't handle a taste of their own medicine for 1 week in accommodations that are actually much nicer than what they subjected us to, then maybe they'll learn something about themselves. She studied my face. This is important to you, isn't it? Not just getting back at them, but making them understand. I nodded. For years, they made us feel like we were less than them because we didn't have what they had. Now I have more than any of them, and suddenly they're falling over themselves to be in my good graces. I want them to confront that hypocrisy head on. Mom pulled me into a hug. Just remember, whatever happens, you've already won. Look at all you've built. Look at who you've become. That's the real victory, not whatever reaction you get from them this week. She was right, of course. But as I finalized the room assignments, that night, placing Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda in the garage suite, I couldn't help but feel a thrill of anticipation. After all these years, the tables had finally turned. The day of their arrival dawned bright and clear, a perfect Malibu summer day. As I stood on my deck overlooking the Pacific, watching the waves crash against the shore, I felt a strange sense of calm. Whatever happened this week, I was ready for it. The first to arrive were Uncle Peter and Aunt Jessica, their luxury SUV pulling into my circular driveway precisely at the agreed-upon check-in time. Their faces as they stepped out and took in the scale of my home, the modern architecture, the panoramic ocean views, the infinity pool glittering in the sunlight, were worth every penny I'd spent on the property. "Ethan!" Uncle Peter called out, arms wide as he approached. "My God, this place is even more spectacular than the photos." I greeted them with the practiced warmth I'd perfected in business settings. Friendly, but measured. "Welcome to Malibu. How was your flight?" As I helped them with their luggage, more cars began to arrive. One by one, the family members who had once looked down on the struggling single mother and her fatherless son now gushed over my success, my home, my view. The air was thick with compliments, each more effusive than the last. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. Uncle Richard's sleek black Mercedes pulled up, and he emerged with Aunt Linda, both wearing designer resort wear and oversized sunglasses. They looked like they were arriving at a celebrity gala rather than a family reunion. "Nephew!" Uncle Richard boomed, striding toward me with confidence. "What an absolutely magnificent home! You've truly outdone yourself." I accepted his hearty handshake and air kiss from Aunt Linda with a smile. "Thank you. I'm glad you could make it. Let me show you where you'll be staying." And with that, the stage was set for what promised to be the most memorable Mitchell family reunion yet, though not for the reasons they expected. The grand tour of my Malibu home was like a victory lap I never knew I needed. I led the family through the open-concept living areas with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing panoramic ocean views, the gourmet kitchen with top-of-the-line appliances, the entertainment room with its theater-sized screen, and finally out to the infinity pool and private beach access. With each new revelation, their eyes grew wider, and the compliments flowed more freely. "Ethan, this is absolutely incredible," Aunt Catherine gushed, running her hand along the marble countertop in the kitchen. "You must have an amazing designer." "Actually, I designed most of it myself," I replied casually. "I've always had an eye for spaces. Probably developed that skill during all those years of figuring out how to make the most of whatever corner I was assigned during our reunions." The comment landed exactly as intended. A moment of uncomfortable silence, followed by forced laughter. and quick subject changes. My mother caught my eye from across the room and gave me a subtle nod. Round 1 to Ethan. As evening approached, the families began asking about room assignments. I had prepared a detailed floor plan and key cards for each room. Before dinner, I'll show everyone their accommodations, I announced. I've tried to consider everyone's needs and preferences. I started with my cousin Amber, her husband Jake, and their twin boys. You'll be in the blue room. It's on the 2nd floor with an ensuite bathroom and a small balcony. The boys should love the bunk beds I had installed. Amber squeezed my arm gratefully. That sounds perfect, Ethan. Thank you. Next came Aunt Catherine and Uncle Bill, who were assigned to the green room, another spacious bedroom suite on the 2nd floor. My mom, of course, had the guest suite adjacent to the master bedroom, with its own sitting area and private deck. The assignments continued smoothly until only Uncle Richard, Aunt Linda, and their 3 adult children with spouses remained. Travis, my garage boy tormentor, was shifting impatiently from foot to foot. Travis and Melissa, you'll be in the converted home office. It's cozy, but there's a pull-out sofa bed and a half bath. Travis's face fell slightly. An office? Not a proper bedroom? It's actually quite comfortable, I assured him, and you'll have more privacy than some others. His siblings, Megan and Jason, were assigned to air mattresses in the converted gym, while his other sister, Amber, and her husband were given the utility closet, now outfitted with a window AC unit and a full-size mattress squeezed between the sea, water heater, and the wall. Finally, I turned to Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda. And for you, I've prepared something special. I led them through the side door into the garage. Unlike the musty, spider-infested space I'd endured at 14, my garage was spotless, with gleaming epoxy floors and climate control. I'd set up 2 comfortable cots with quality linens, a small dresser, a floor lamp, and even a portable bathroom screen concealing a camping toilet. The main bathroom is just inside the door there if you need a shower, I explained, gesturing toward the house entrance. I thought you might appreciate the privacy out here. And don't worry about the temperature, unlike your garage in Wisconsin. This one has air conditioning. The look on Uncle Richard's face was priceless, a mixture of disbelief, indignation, and the slow dawning realization of exactly what I was doing. Aunt Linda's mouth had fallen open, and she seemed incapable of speech. This is. Uncle Richard sputtered, his face reddening. Ethan, surely you have another bedroom available. This is a 6-bedroom house. 7. If you count the converted office, I corrected him. And they're all accounted for. But I assure you, this space is quite comfortable. I spared no expense. On the cots. They're top-of-the-line camping equipment. Much better than the old sleeping bags you provided for my mom and me. Uncle Richard's eyes narrowed as the pointed reference hit home. For a moment, I thought he might explode with anger, but years of maintaining appearances in high society had trained him well. He forced a smile. Well, this is unexpected, but we're grateful for your hospitality nonetheless. Are you sure? I asked innocently. Because I remember you saying the garage wasn't so bad and it was just for 2 weeks. This is only for 1 week. And as you can see, it's much nicer than the one you put us in. Aunt Linda finally found her voice. Richard, this is unacceptable. I'm not sleeping in a garage. It's just for a week, Linda. I echoed his words from so many years ago. Family is family, right? Before either could respond, I cheerfully added, Dinner will be ready in 30 minutes. I've hired a private chef for tonight's welcome meal. Don't be late. And with that, I left them standing among their luggage in the garage, the door swinging shut behind me. Back in the house, I found my mom waiting for me with a mixed expression of amusement and concern. Did you really put them in the garage? She whispered. I nodded. Poetic justice. And how did they take it? About as well as you'd expect. Uncle Richard is trying to maintain his dignity, and Aunt Linda looks like she swallowed a lemon. Mom sighed. This is going to be an interesting week. That's the plan, I replied with a smile. Dinner that evening was a masterpiece of subtle tension and forced pleasantries. Chef Marco had prepared an exquisite 5-course meal featuring locally sourced ingredients and paired wines. As we all gathered around the massive dining table on my oceanfront deck, the conversation flowed with artificial ease, punctuated by occasional strained silences. Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda arrived last, both having changed into evening wear. That seemed absurdly formal for a family dinner. Their faces were fixed in tight smiles. "Ethan," Uncle Richard began as the first course was being served. "Linda and I have been discussing the sleeping arrangements. While we appreciate the thoughtfulness of your garage accommodations, we wondered if perhaps there might be a hotel nearby where we could stay instead. We'd be happy to cover the cost ourselves, of course." All conversation at the table halted. 22 pairs of eyes swiveled between Uncle Richard and me. I took a slow sip of my wine. A hotel? But Uncle Richard, I thought the whole point of these reunions was for the family to stay together under one roof. That's what you always insisted on, even when accommodations were tight. Family is family, right? He cleared his throat uncomfortably. Yes. Well, circumstances change. We're not as young as we used to be, and Linda has some back issues that might make those costs problematic. Back issues? I'm so sorry to hear that, Aunt Linda. Why didn't you mention this before? If physical comfort is a concern, I'd be happy to have you switch with Mom. She's quite accustomed to making do with less than ideal sleeping arrangements during family gatherings. My mom nearly choked on her wine. Aunt Linda's face flushed. No, that won't be necessary. Your mother should be comfortable. We'll manage. Are you sure? Because I remember being told that making do was part of the family experience. In fact, I distinctly recall being 14 years old and hearing that sleeping in a garage wasn't so bad, and I should stop complaining because at least I had a roof over my head. The table had gone deathly quiet. Some of my cousins were staring at their plates, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Uncle Richard's face had gone from red to purple. Perhaps, my mom interjected smoothly, we should table this discussion for now and enjoy this beautiful meal Ethan has provided. Marco, this gazpacho is absolutely divine. The conversation gradually resumed, though with a noticeably strained quality. Throughout the meal, I caught various family members giving me speculative glances as if seeing me for the first time, not just as the successful tech entrepreneur with the fancy house, but as someone who had remembered every slight, every dismissive comment, every moment of exclusion, and who might now be in a position to settle old scores. After dinner, most of the family retreated to their assigned quarters to unpack and recover from their travels. I sat alone on the deck with a glass of whiskey, watching the moonlight play across the waves, when my cousin Travis approached. "Hey," he said awkwardly, hovering at the edge of the deck. "Got room for company?" I gestured to the empty chair beside me. "It's a free country." He sat down, fidgeting with his wedding ring. "Nice place you've got here. Really impressive." "Thanks. Look, about the office thing, I'm not complaining. It's actually pretty comfortable. The pullout's not bad." I raised an eyebrow. But nothing. He sighed heavily. "I get what you're doing, Ethan. With the room assignments, with my parents in the garage. It's about all those summers, isn't it?" I took a sip of my whiskey, letting the silence stretch between us. "I was a real jerk to you back then," he finally said. "The whole garage boy thing. It was stupid and mean. Kids can be cruel, but that's no excuse. This was unexpected. Travis had always been the most arrogant of my cousins, quick to assert his place in the family hierarchy, and never one for self-reflection." "Why bring this up now?" I asked. "Is it because you're sleeping in an office instead of a proper bedroom? Or because you've realized I'm not the failure everyone assumed I'd be?" He winced. "I deserve that. But honestly, It's because seeing you put my parents in the garage made me remember how we treated you and your mom. And it didn't feel good, man. It made me think about what kind of person I was, what kind of person I am. I studied his face in the moonlight, looking for signs of insincerity or manipulation, but all I saw was discomfort and something that looked surprisingly like genuine remorse. It's been 15 years, Travis. Why should I believe you've changed? He shrugged. I'm not asking you to. I'm just saying I'm sorry, for what it's worth. We sat in silence for a few minutes, listening to the crash of the waves against the shore. My kids are the same age now that I was when I was calling you garage. Boy, he continued, and if I ever heard them talk to someone the way I talk to you, I'd be ashamed. I am ashamed. Perhaps it was the whiskey, or the moonlight, or the unexpected vulnerability from my once tormentor, but I felt something shift within me. Not forgiveness exactly, but a willingness to consider it. The office has a memory foam mattress topper. In the closet, I said finally. It makes the pull-out a lot more comfortable. Travis looked up, surprised. Thanks, I appreciate that. And there are extra pillows in the hall linen closet. Melissa might want one. Those pull-out couch pillows are never great. He nodded. Thanks, Ethan, really. As he got up to leave, I added, this doesn't mean I've forgotten Travis, or that we're suddenly best friends. I know, he replied, but it's a start, right? After he left, I sat for a long time, watching the ocean and thinking about forgiveness. What it meant, what it cost, and whether some wounds were too deep to ever fully heal. Morning came with the soft glow of sunrise over the Pacific and the sound of hushed voices from the kitchen. I found my mom and Amber preparing coffee and setting out pastries from a local bakery I'd had delivered. Sleep well? I asked, accepting a steaming mug from my mom. Like a dream, she replied with a smile. That guest suite is bigger than my first apartment. Amber nodded in agreement. The boys are obsessed with the bunk beds. They're already asking if we can get some for their room at home. We chatted easily as other family members began to trickle in, all except for Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda. As the morning wore on with no sign of them, curiosity turned to concern. Has anyone seen my parents this morning? Megan asked, glancing around the kitchen. Just then, the side door opened and the missing couple appeared. They looked rumpled and exhausted, with dark circles under their eyes and forced smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Good morning, everyone, Uncle Richard said with false cheer. Beautiful day, isn't it? Did you sleep okay? I asked innocently. I know garage sleeping can take some getting used to. Aunt Linda's smile tightened further. It was an experience. Though I must say, Richard snores much louder when he's sleeping on a cot. A ripple of awkward laughter spread through the kitchen. Today's agenda is open, I announced, changing the subject. The beach is obviously available, the pool is heated, and I've prepared a list of local attractions if anyone wants to explore. Dinner is on your own tonight, but the kitchen is fully stocked if you want to cook, or there are some excellent restaurants nearby. As the group dispersed to plan their day, Uncle Richard lingered behind. When we were alone, he cleared his throat uncomfortably. Ethan, about the sleeping arrangements? Yes, Uncle Richard? I understand what you're doing, and I suppose in a way I deserve it. But Linda doesn't sleep well in unfamiliar environments, and she was up most of the night. Would you just consider, allowing us to find alternative accommodations? We wouldn't mention it to the rest of the family. I leaned against the counter, studying his face. The proud, confident man who had always made me feel small and insignificant now looked tired and slightly desperate. What's really bothering you, Uncle Richard? Is it the garage itself or what it represents? He blinked, taken aback by the direct question. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. The garage is a symbol, isn't it? Of the way you treated my mom and me all those years. of the family hierarchy you created, with us at the bottom, of the fact that you never, not once, considered how it felt for us to be relegated to storage spaces and basements while everyone else got proper rooms. He had the grace to look embarrassed. That was a long time ago, Ethan. People change, families evolve. Do they? Because from where I'm standing, the only thing that's changed is my bank account. Suddenly I'm worth your time and attention because I have something you want. That's not fair, he protested weakly. Isn't it? When was the last time you called? My mom before you saw that Forbes article? When was the last time you invited us to dinner, or asked how we were doing, or showed any interest at all in our lives? Uncle Richard looked down at his expensive loafers. I may have neglected those relationships. That was my mistake. Yes, it was. And now you're sleeping in my garage for a week, and suddenly you understand how it feels to be an afterthought in your own family. Funny how perspective works, isn't it? Before he could respond, my phone buzzed with a message. It was Madison, my assistant, reminding me about a video call I couldn't reschedule. I have a business matter to attend to, I told him. Enjoy your day, Uncle Richard. And remember, it's just for a week. Surely you can handle that much. After all, my mom and I did it for years. As I walked away, I heard him call after me. People make mistakes, Ethan. Even family. I paused in the doorway. Yes, they do. The question is, what are you willing to do to fix them? Leaving him to ponder that question, I headed to my home, office, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. The revenge I'd planned was unfolding perfectly, and yet it felt increasingly hollow. Travis's unexpected apology, the genuine delight of Amber's boys in their bunk beds, even Uncle Richard's grudging acknowledgement of his past mistakes, it was all more complicated than the simple narrative of retribution I'd constructed in my mind. As I settled in for my video call, I wondered if this week would end the way I'd initially envisioned, with the satisfaction of having turned the tables on those who had once looked down on me, or if something entirely different was taking shape in my beachfront home. The next few days passed in a blur of beach outings, poolside conversations, and increasingly complex family dynamics. I found myself observing the Mitchell clan with new eyes, not just as the childhood outsider seeking vindication, but as an adult trying to understand the tangled web of relationships that defined us. By day 3, patterns had emerged. Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda maintained a stoic front about their garage accommodations, though the dark circles under their eyes told a different story. My cousins had split into 2 distinct camps, those who seemed genuinely interested in reconnecting, Amber, surprisingly Travis, and a few others, and those who were clearly there to network and leverage my success, Jason and Megan, primarily. Each morning, I'd find my mom and Amber preparing breakfast together, laughing like old friends despite the 20-year age gap between them. It struck me how similar they were. Both teachers, both naturally kind, both somehow managing to remain untainted by the family's more materialistic tendencies. You know, my mom said to me on the 3rd morning as we watched Amber's twins building an elaborate sandcastle on the beach. I always thought you and Amber were the only ones who got the best of the Mitchell genes. What do you mean? The curiosity, the empathy, the ability to see beyond status and money. She sipped her coffee thoughtfully. The rest of them, they're not bad people, Ethan. They're just products of a certain environment. Richard and Peter were raised to believe that success meant wealth and prestige, and they passed that on to their children. That doesn't excuse how they treated us, I pointed out. No, it doesn't. But understanding someone isn't the same as excusing them. She gazed out at the ocean. I've had a lot of time to think about this family over the years, and I've realized that in some ways they're trapped in a prison of their own making. Always chasing more, always comparing, always worrying about appearances. I considered her words as I watched Uncle Richard on the beach, attempting to play with Amber's boys, but clearly uncomfortable, as if he'd forgotten how to interact with children without an audience to impress. Later that day, I was working in my home office when there was a soft knock at the door. It was Aunt Catherine, the quiet middle sibling who had always existed somewhat in Richard's shadow. "Do you have a minute?" she asked hesitantly. I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Of course. What's up?" She sat down, smoothing her linen pants nervously. "I wanted to talk to you about Richard and Linda." "What about them?" "They're struggling with the garage situation. Linda hasn't slept properly in days, and Richard's back is acting up from those cots." She held up a hand as I started to respond. "I'm not asking you to change the arrangements. I understand why you did it, and honestly, it's long overdue that someone showed Richard what it feels like to be on the receiving end of his hierarchical thinking. This was unexpected. Aunt Catherine had never been openly critical of her older brother before. "Then what are you here to discuss?" I asked. She took a deep breath. "I want to apologize for my part in how you and your mother were treated all those years. I never spoke up when Richard relegated you to garages and basements. I never offered to switch rooms or accommodate you better. I was complicit in my silence." I leaned back in my chair, studying her face. "Why didn't you?" "Fear, mostly. Richard has always been the family patriarch, especially after Dad died. He controlled the family finances, organized the reunions, made all the decisions. It was easier to go along with him than to challenge the status quo." She looked down at her hands. "It's not an excuse, just an explanation. And now? Now I see a successful young man who achieved everything on his own, despite having none of the advantages my children had. A young man who's strong enough to stand up to Richard in ways I never could." She smiled sadly. "It's made me realize how much of my life I've spent being afraid to rock the boat." Our conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the beach. Looking out the window, I could see Travis's wife Melissa helping Uncle Richard up from the sand. He appeared to be in pain, hunched over and grimacing. "What's going on?" I asked, moving toward the door. "I don't know," Catherine replied, following me. We hurried down to the beach where a small crowd had gathered around Uncle Richard. He was sitting on one of the lounge chairs, his face pale and drawn. "What happened?" I asked Amber, who was nearby. "He was trying to show the boys how to do a handstand," she explained. "I think he threw his back out." Uncle Richard looked up. As I approached, his expression a mixture of pain and embarrassment. "Just a twinge," he insisted. "I'll be fine." But as he tried to stand, he winced and sank back onto the chair. "Maybe I should lie down for a bit." "Let's get you inside," I said, motioning for Travis to help me. Together, we supported Uncle Richard as he hobbled slowly across the beach toward the house. "The garage is too far," I decided as we reached the deck. "Let's take him to my room. For now. The bed is better for his back." We helped him upstairs to the master suite, where he collapsed onto my king-sized bed with a groan of relief. Aunt Linda hovered anxiously nearby as I sent Travis to find some pain relievers. "Do we need to call a doctor?" Linda asked, her earlier resentment toward me forgotten in her concern for her husband. I shook my head. "Let's give the muscle relaxants a chance to work first. If he's not feeling better in an hour, we can reassess." As we waited for the medication to take effect, I found myself sitting beside the man who had once made me feel so small and insignificant, now vulnerable and in pain in my home. It was a strange reversal, but not the triumphant moment I might have imagined. "I'm sorry about this," Uncle Richard said quietly. Not exactly the impression I wanted to make, throwing my back out trying to impress some 7-year-olds. "They were impressed," I assured him. "Until you collapsed. They thought you were the coolest granduncle ever." He chuckled, then winced at the movement. "I'm not used to being the family clown. That was always your dad's role." The mention of my father caught me off guard. My family rarely spoke about him, I barely remember him, I admitted. Uncle Richard's face softened. He was talented. Irresponsible as hell, but talented. Could pick up any instrument and play it by ear within minutes. He shifted slightly, trying to find a more comfortable position. I was always jealous of that. I had to work for everything. Grades, medical school, my practice. Nothing came easily. I didn't know that about him. Your mother never told you? I shook my head. She doesn't talk about him much. I think it still hurts. Diane always saw the best in him, even when the rest of us could see he wasn't father material. He looked at me thoughtfully. You got her resilience, thank God. And maybe some of his creative spark, but channeled into something practical. Your business? It's impressive, Ethan. Truly impressive. The medication began to take effect, and Uncle Richard's eyelids grew heavy. Would you mind if I rest here for a while? He asked, his voice slurring slightly. Take all the time you need, I replied, standing up. We'll check on you later. As I closed the door behind me, I found Aunt Linda waiting in the hallway, worry etched on her face. He'll be fine, I reassured her. Just need some rest. She nodded gratefully. Thank you for letting him use your room. That was very kind of you. It's no problem. It's the most comfortable bed in the house. She hesitated, then asked, Ethan, about the garage. You can stay in my room while Uncle Richard recovers, I interrupted. There's a chair in there that converts to a single bed. It's actually quite comfortable. I've fallen asleep on it many times while working late. Relief flooded her face. Thank you. I know we don't deserve your kindness, but I appreciate it nonetheless. As she turned to go, I found myself saying, Aunt Linda, can I ask you something? She turned back. Of course. All those years. Did you ever think about how it felt for my mom and me? Being treated as less than everyone else? Her expression fell, a mix of shame and discomfort crossing her features. I didn't think about it much at all, if I'm being honest. Richard made the arrangements and I just went along with them. She looked down at her expensive sandals. That's not a very good answer, is it? No, I agreed. But it's an honest one. If it helps at all, she offered. I've thought about it constantly since we arrived here. Being in that garage, it's given me a perspective I never had before. Before I could respond, Travis appeared at the end of the hall. Everything okay with Dad? He's resting, Aunt Linda replied. The medication is helping. As they talked, I slipped away, needing some space to process the unexpected turns this reunion was taking. I headed down to the beach, where I found my mom sitting alone at the water's edge, watching the waves roll in. Mind if I join you? I asked, sitting beside her on the sand. I heard about Richard, she said. Is he okay? He'll live. His pride is probably more injured than his back. I picked up a shell, turning it over in my hands. I let him have my room to recover. She raised an eyebrow. That was generous of you. I don't know if it was generosity or just exhaustion with the whole revenge scenario. I sighed. This week isn't playing out how I expected. How so? I thought I'd feel vindicated, seeing them uncomfortable, making them understand how it felt to be treated as an afterthought. But instead, I just feel empty. Like even if they all learn their lesson and apologize, it won't change what happened. Mom placed her hand over mine. That's because you can't change the past, Ethan. No amount of revenge or apologies can give us back those years of feeling less than. The question is, what do you want for the future? I considered her question as I watched the sunlight dancing on the waves. I don't know. Part of me wants to maintain the distance I've had from them these past years. It's been easier that way. And the other part? The other part wonders if there might be some relationships worth salvaging. Amber, for sure. Maybe Travis, surprisingly. Even Aunt Catherine seemed genuinely regretful today. Mom nodded thoughtfully. Families are complicated. Honey, people change, sometimes for the better. The trick is figuring out who's genuinely evolved and who's just responding to your changed circumstances. How do I tell the difference? Time, consistency, actions over words. She smiled ruefully. And a healthy dose of skepticism never hurts. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves crash against the shore. Eventually, she asked, "So what's your plan now? Are you going to keep Richard and Linda in the garage once he recovers?" I hadn't considered that. The vindictive part of me wanted to say yes, to stick to my original plan. But something had shifted inside me during my conversations with Richard, Linda, and Catherine. "I don't know," I admitted. Making them sleep in the garage made a point, but continuing it after he's injured just feels petty. "And you're not petty," Mom said simply. "You never have been. Even as a kid, when the others would exclude you or tease you, you never responded in kind. You just worked harder, dreamed bigger." Her words resonate with something deep inside me. Perhaps my success wasn't just about proving my family wrong. It was about proving something to myself. That I could rise above not just their expectations, but also their limitations. "I need to think about it," I told her. That evening, we ordered in from a local seafood restaurant. With Uncle Richard still recovering in my room, the dynamics at dinner were noticeably different. Without his dominating presence, conversations flowed more naturally, crossing the usual family faction lines. I found myself in a surprisingly enjoyable discussion with Jason, Megan, and Travis about the early days of my startup. They seemed genuinely interested, asking thoughtful questions about the challenges I'd faced and the decisions I'd made. I always assumed tech success stories were about being in the right place at the right time, Megan admitted. But the way you describe it, it sounds more like years of hard work punctuated by moments of luck. That's exactly what it is, I confirmed. The overnight success stories you read about are usually years in the making. Kind of like your Malibu mansion, Travis quipped. To us, it seemed like you went from sleeping in garages to owning a beachfront property overnight. But there was a whole journey in between that we weren't privy to. His comment made me realize something, just as I had constructed narratives about them based on our limited interactions at family reunions. They had done the same with me. None of us had the full picture of each other's lives. After dinner, as everyone was helping clean up, Aunt Catherine pulled me aside. "How's Richard doing?" Last I checked, he was sleeping comfortably. The muscle relaxants really knocked him out, she nodded. "That's good. Listen, some of us have been talking about the sleeping arrangements and everything else. We want you to know that we understand what you were trying to do, and we don't blame you for it." "You don't?" "No. It was a wake-up call we probably needed." She glanced around at the others, lowering her voice. "Richard has always set the tone for this family, and none of us ever had the courage to question it. Not until you did, by putting him in that garage." I wasn't sure how to respond. This wasn't the outcome I had anticipated. "Anyway," she continued, "we've taken up a collection to rent a nearby apartment for anyone who's uncomfortable with their current sleeping arrangements. No hard feelings, no drama. Just a practical solution." My first instinct was to be offended. Were they rejecting my hospitality? But I quickly recognized it for what it was, an attempt to meet me halfway. They weren't demanding better accommodations or complaining about my arrangements. They were simply finding a solution that preserved everyone's dignity. "That's thoughtful," I said finally, "but unnecessary. I've been thinking about reshuffling the room assignments anyway, given Uncle Richard's condition." Catherine looked surprised. "You have?" I nodded. "I've made my point. Continuing to make people uncomfortable just feels small." She smiled warmly. "You're a better person than most of us, Ethan. I hope you know that." Later that night, I sat on my deck alone, contemplating how to proceed. The vindictive plan I'd crafted so carefully no longer felt right, but simply abandoning it felt like letting them off the hook too easily. There needed to be a resolution, some acknowledgement of the past and commitment to a different future. As the moon rose over the Pacific, casting a silver path across the dark water, an idea began to take shape in my mind. Not a punishment or even a lesson, but an opportunity for all of us. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, handing me a steaming mug. "It's a complete 180 from your original revenge scenario." I nodded, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I'm sure. Revenge feels good in theory, but in practice, it's just perpetuating the same cycle. I want something different." Madison smiled approvingly. "For what it's worth, I think it's the right call. You've always been about moving forward, not dwelling in the past. It's why you're such a good CEO." Speaking of which, how's the office running without me? Everything's fine. The development team hit a snag with the new interface, but Priya handled it. The investor meeting went well. They loved the quarterly projections. And HR finally filled that senior designer position. It struck me how different my life was now from those long-ago family reunions. I had responsibilities, people who depended on me, problems that had nothing to do with family hierarchies or sleeping arrangements. In many ways, I'd already moved beyond the need for validation from the Mitchells. While Madison made some calls, I checked on Uncle Richard. He was awake, looking much better than the previous day, sitting up against the pillows with his laptop. "Working from bed?" I asked, leaning against the door frame. He looked up with a rueful smile. "Force of habit. 40 years of medicine. I checked patient charts on my honeymoon. How's the back?" "Much better, thank you. I think I can move back to our accommodations today." I shook my head. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that. I'm reorganizing the sleeping arrangements." His eyebrows rose. "Oh? Yes. I've realized that making some of you sleep in converted spaces was, well, it made a point, but continuing it doesn't serve any purpose beyond pettiness." Uncle Richard studied my face. "That's very mature of you, Ethan. Don't give me too much credit. I'm not suddenly forgetting how you treated my mom and me all those years. But I'm trying to be better than that." He nodded slowly. "Fair enough." After a pause, he added, "For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just because I ended up in the garage myself, but because I've had time to reflect on how unfair it was to you and Diane." "Why did you do it?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Was it because she married Dad against your advice, or because we didn't have money?" Uncle Richard sighed heavily. "It wasn't that simple. Yes, I disapproved of Alex. I thought he was unreliable, and I was right about that. But it was more about—" He trailed off, searching for words. "About what?" "About fear, I suppose. Fear disguised as responsibility." He closed his laptop, giving me his full attention. "After our parents died, I became the de facto head of the family. I was the oldest, the most financially secure. Everyone looked to me to maintain the family traditions, to keep us connected. This wasn't where I expected the conversation to go. What does that have to do with making us sleep in garages?" It became about maintaining a certain image of success, of having made it. Your mom's situation, a single mother struggling financially, it didn't fit that image. So instead of addressing my own discomfort, I pushed you to the margins, literally and figuratively. He shook his head. "It's not an excuse, just an explanation." I considered his words. "You know what the irony is? If you had just treated us normally, including us fully, I probably wouldn't have been so determined to prove myself. Your rejection fueled my ambition. Then perhaps I did one thing right, albeit accidentally." He attempted a smile, then winced as he shifted position. "So, what's this new plan for the sleeping arrangements?" "You'll see at breakfast. Can you make it downstairs?" With some effort and assistance from Aunt Linda, Uncle Richard made it to the kitchen just as the rest of the family was gathering for breakfast. I had asked Madison to set up a projector and screen on one wall, which had everyone curious. "Good morning, everyone," I greeted them, standing at the head of the large kitchen island. "I hope you all slept well, or at least as well as your various accommodations allowed." There were a few chuckles and some sheepish looks. "As you can. See, I've set up a presentation. Before we get to that, I want to acknowledge something. When I invited you all here, I had an agenda beyond just hosting a family reunion. I wanted you to experience what my mom and I experienced for years, being relegated to less comfortable spaces, treated as afterthoughts in the family hierarchy." The room grew quiet as everyone listened intently. I wanted you to feel what we felt, and to some extent, it worked. But I've realized that dwelling in past grievances, however justified, isn't the path forward. So I've decided to revise the sleeping arrangements for the remainder of the week. I clicked a remote, and the first slide appeared on the screen, a floor plan of the house with new room assignments. I've made adjustments to ensure everyone has a proper sleeping space. No more garages, no more utility closets. Some of you will still need to share rooms, but everyone will have a bed. Relief was visible on several faces, though Amber looked concerned. "Ethan, you don't have to do this. We understand what you were trying to show us." "I appreciate that, Amber. But this isn't just about your comfort. It's about the kind of person I want to be. Treating people poorly because they once treated me poorly. That's not the legacy I want to create." I clicked to the next slide, which showed a beautiful beachfront property not unlike my own, but larger, a sprawling compound with multiple buildings around a central courtyard. This is why I asked Madison to join us this morning. This property is about 20 minutes up the coast from here. It's currently for sale, and I've been considering it as an investment. Confused glances were exchanged around the table. "What does this have to do with us?" Uncle Peter asked. "I'm getting to that. This estate has 10 bedrooms across the main house and 2 guest cottages. Plenty of space for our growing family, with no need for anyone to sleep in a garage or basement." I clicked to another slide showing the property's spectacular pool area and private beach access. "I'm proposing this as the permanent location for all future Mitchell family reunions. I'll purchase it as an investment property, but it will be available to the family for 2 weeks each summer and 1 week during the winter holidays." The room erupted in exclamations of surprise and questions. I held up my hand for quiet. "Before you get too excited, there are conditions attached to this offer." Uncle Richard raised an eyebrow. "What kind of conditions?" "First, the property will be held in a trust, with my mom as the primary trustee and me as secondary. All decisions about its use and scheduling will go through her." My mom looked at me in surprise. I hadn't told her this part of the plan. "Second, there will be a new system for room assignments. Each year they'll rotate, so everyone takes turns with the best and less desirable accommodations. No one family gets preferential treatment based on status or finances." I clicked to the next slide, which outlined a detailed rotation schedule. "Third, and most importantly, I want a genuine reset of how this family operates. No more hierarchy with some members at the top and others at the bottom. No more judgments based on career choices or financial status. We're either all equal participants in this family, or this property remains simply one of my investments, unavailable for family use." The room was silent as everyone absorbed my proposal. Uncle Richard was the first to speak. "These are reasonable conditions, Ethan. More than reasonable given the past." He looked around at the family. "I, for one, am in favor. And I owe both you and your mother an apology for my role in creating the environment you're now trying to change." One by one, the others voiced their agreement, some adding their own apologies for past behaviors or silences when they should have spoken up. Travis cleared his throat. "I think this is incredibly generous, Ethan, but I have a question. What about the property taxes? Maintenance? It seems unfair for you to shoulder all of that for a place we'd all use." It was a good question, and one I'd anticipated. I've thought about that. The property will be available for vacation rentals when the family isn't using it, which should offset most of the maintenance costs. As for the rest, I'm proposing a family fund. Everyone contributes annually based on their means, no fixed amount. Those who can give more, do so. Those who can't, contribute in other ways, managing bookings, coordinating maintenance, whatever skills they have to offer. My mom, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. It's a beautiful idea, Ethan. Creating something new instead of just trying to repair what was broken. She looked around at the family. But it will only work if everyone is genuinely committed to doing things differently. Diane's right, Aunt Catherine agreed. This isn't just about a fancy beach house. It's about redefining our family culture. Are we all willing to put in that work? To my surprise, there were nods and murmurs of agreement around the table. Even Aunt Linda, who had been mostly quiet throughout the reunion, spoke up. I want to be part of this change, she said, looking directly at my mom. Diane, the way we treated you and Ethan, there's no excuse for it. I followed Richard's lead. Without questioning whether it was right, I should have done better, and I want to do better going forward. My mom reached across the table and squeezed her hand. Thank you, Linda. That means a lot. The conversation continued over breakfast, with family members asking questions about the property and offering suggestions for how the new arrangement might work. There was an energy in the room I'd never felt at a Mitchell gathering before, a sense of possibility and genuine connection. After breakfast, as everyone dispersed to enjoy the day, my mom pulled me aside. When did you come up with this plan? Last night, mostly. The property's been on the market for a while. My real estate agent mentioned it months ago, but I wasn't interested then. It seemed too big for just me. And now? I shrugged. Now I'm thinking about legacy, about what I want to build that lasts beyond my business success. And somehow, despite everything, family still matters. She studied my face, her eyes shining, with pride and something like wonder. You know, when you were born, I had such dreams for you, but you've surpassed every one of them, not just in what you've achieved, but in who you've become. Her words filled a space inside me that I hadn't even realized was empty. A need for validation, not from the family that had rejected us, but from the one person who had always believed in me. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Madison arranged for a real estate agent to give us a virtual tour of the property that afternoon, and the family gathered in my living room to see the details. There were exciting discussions about which room each person would choose first in the rotation, how we might update certain spaces, and ideas for new traditions we could establish. Uncle Richard, moving stiffly but determined to participate, sat next to me on the couch. "This is more than we deserve, you know," he said quietly, while the others were distracted by a debate about whether the pool needed updating. "It's not about deserving," I replied. "It's about choosing what kind of future we want." He nodded. Thoughtfully. "When did you get so wise?" "Probably somewhere between sleeping in your garage and building my first $1 million company." He chuckled, then grew serious. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier, about how my rejection fueled your ambition. I wonder how many other family dynamics have shaped us in ways we don't fully understand." It was an insightful observation from a man I'd always viewed as emotionally oblivious. Perhaps he too was capable of growth and change. That evening, we had another family dinner, but the atmosphere couldn't have been more different from the first night. Instead of strained politeness and underlying tension, there was genuine conversation, laughter, and a palpable sense of reconnection. After dinner, my cousin Megan approached me as I was refilling my wine glass. Of all my cousins, she had been the most distant during the reunion, careful and guarded in her interactions. "Can we talk?" she asked, gesturing toward the deck. Outside under the stars, with the sound of waves crashing below us, she seemed to struggle with what to say. "I owe you an apology," she finally began. Not just for how things were when we were kids, but for how I've been this week. I came here with an agenda, hoping to pitch you on investing in Jason's new business venture. It was manipulative and opportunistic. I appreciated her honesty. Thank you for telling me that. The thing is, she continued, I've always been a little intimidated by you. By me? I was genuinely surprised. Even when I was the kid sleeping in the garage? She nodded. Even then, you had this certainty about you. Like you knew exactly who you were, even when everyone was telling you that you were less than. I never had that kind of self-possession. I've always defined myself by external validation, my father's approval, my husband's success, the right zip code, the right schools for my kids. Her vulnerability caught me off guard. I had no idea you felt that way. How could you? We never really knew each other. That's what I regret most, that we grew up as strangers who happened to be related, instead of actual family. I realized she was right. Despite years of family reunions, we had never moved beyond superficial interactions and the roles assigned to us in the family hierarchy. Maybe we can change that now, I suggested. She smiled tentatively. I'd like that. And just so you know, I think what you're doing with the new property is incredible. Not just the financial generosity, but the vision behind it. Creating a place where future generations of Mitchells can build something better than what we had. As we rejoined the others inside, I found myself contemplating the unexpected turns this reunion had taken. I had arrived determined to exact a particular kind of justice, to make my family understand what they had put us through. Instead, I was discovering that true justice might look more like transformation than retribution, creating something new rather than simply settling old scores. Later that night, as the house quieted and most of the family had retired to their rooms, their new, more comfortable rooms, I sat with my mom on the deck, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the moonlight on the water. Do you think it will work? She asked. This new vision for the family? I considered the question carefully. I don't know. Change is hard, especially in family dynamics as entrenched as ours. But I think it's worth trying. And if it doesn't? If old patterns reassert themselves? Then at least we'll know we gave it our best shot, and the property will make an excellent investment either way. I grinned at her and she laughed. Always the businessman. But I see what you're really doing, you know. What's that? Creating the family you always wished we had. The one where everyone is valued, everyone belongs, no one sleeps in the garage unless it's their turn in the rotation. She was right, of course. Beneath the practical considerations and financial arrangements, I was attempting to build the family experience I had longed for as a child, one of genuine inclusion and mutual respect. Is that naive? I asked her. She shook her head. It's hopeful. And hope is never naive, Ethan. It's the most courageous thing we can offer each other. As we sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars and listening to the rhythm of the waves, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this moment. From a kid sleeping on a cot in a musty garage to a successful entrepreneur with a beachfront mansion. From someone seeking revenge to someone offering reconciliation and a new beginning. The garage boy had grown up. And in growing up, I'd learned that true power isn't about paying back old hurts. It's about creating new possibilities. Even, or perhaps especially, with family. The final days of the reunion passed with a newfound harmony I'd never experienced at a Mitchell family gathering. The tension that had marked the early part of the week had dissolved, replaced by genuine efforts to connect and rebuild relationships that had been damaged by years of hierarchy and resentment. On our second-to-last day, I organized a professional photographer to capture the first official photo of the reunited and restructured Mitchell family. We gathered on the beach at sunset, the golden light casting a warm glow over everyone. Unlike the stiff formal arrangements of past family photos, with Uncle Richard and his family always positioned prominently in the center. We arranged ourselves in a casual semicircle, no one person or family unit given pride of place. The photographer snapped away, directing us to shift positions and capturing candid moments between shots. I observed the subtle changes in how we interacted with each other. My mom and Aunt Linda stood side by side, chatting easily. Travis's children played with Amber's twins, building a sandcastle at our feet. Uncle Richard, though still moving, stiffly from his back injury, had shed some of the authoritative demeanor that had defined him throughout my childhood. "This is a keeper," the photographer said, showing us a particularly good shot on his camera screen. "Great natural energy from everyone." We all crowded around to see, exclaiming over how well it had turned out. In that moment, shoulder to shoulder, with relatives who had once made me feel like an outsider, I felt the first genuine stirrings of what might actually be family pride. Later that evening, I received an unexpected text from Madison. "Offer on coastal property accepted. Sellers eager to close quickly, can expedite paperwork if you're still sure." I showed the message to my mom, who was helping me prepare for our final dinner together. "Are you still sure?" she asked, echoing Madison's question. I nodded. More than ever. The past few days have convinced me it's the right move. It's a big investment, Ethan. Not just financially. I know. But something Uncle Richard said stuck with me, about how fear disguised as responsibility influenced his decisions. I don't want my choices to be driven by old fears or resentments. I want to build something meaningful. She squeezed my arm, affectionately. "Then let's make it happen." That night's dinner was meant to be the culmination of our week together, a chance to solidify the new understanding we'd developed and set expectations for the future. I'd arranged for Chef Marco to return and create another spectacular meal, this time served at a long table on the beach, lit by tiki torches and string lights. As everyone took their seats, the atmosphere was relaxed and celebratory, so different from the tense formality of our first dinner together. Uncle Peter raised his glass for a toast. "To Ethan," he began, "not just for his generous hospitality this week, but for having the courage to confront us with some uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our family dynamic." "Hear, hear," echoed around the table. "And to new beginnings," added Aunt Catherine, "a chance to be the family we always should have been." The sentiment was met with enthusiastic agreement as glasses clinked together. I caught my mom's eye across the table. She was smiling, but I could see the caution in her expression. We'd both been disappointed by family promises before. As the first course was served, I decided it was time to share the news. "I have a nice announcement," I said, standing to address the group. "I heard from my assistant earlier today. The offer on the coastal property has been accepted." Surprised and delighted exclamations erupted around the table. "Already?" Uncle Richard asked. "That was fast work." I nodded. "The sellers are motivated, and so am I. If all goes well with the inspections and paperwork, we could close within the month." "That's incredible news, Ethan," Amber said warmly. "The boys haven't stopped talking about the virtual tour we saw. They're especially excited about the treehouse in the backyard." "I thought that might be a hit with the younger generation," I said, smiling at her twins, who were bouncing in their seats with excitement. "So how will this work exactly?" Uncle Peter asked, always the practical one. "You mentioned a trust, contributions based on means." "Yes. I'll have my lawyers draw up the terms for the family trust. My mom will be the primary trustee, as I mentioned before. I'll cover the purchase price, but each family will contribute annually to a maintenance fund based on what they can afford." I looked around the table. "This isn't about money, though. It's about commitment, to the property and to each other." "What if someone can't contribute financially?" asked Megan, who I knew had been going through some marriage difficulties that had impacted her household income. "Then they contribute in other ways," I explained. "Managing bookings when the property is rented out, coordinating maintenance, organizing family events. The point is participation, not financial obligation. The concept seemed to resonate with everyone. Even Uncle Richard, who had built his entire identity around financial success, nodded approvingly. "There's one more thing," I continued. "I want this property to represent a fresh start, so I'm proposing we create a family charter of sorts, written principles for how we interact with each other, how decisions are made, how conflicts are resolved." Travis raised an eyebrow. "A family charter? Sounds very corporate." I laughed. "Maybe so. But corporations last for generations because they have clear structures and values. Why shouldn't families benefit from the same approach?" "I like it," Aunt Catherine chimed in. "It makes our intentions explicit. No more unspoken rules or assumptions about who gets what or whose opinion matters most." We spent the rest of dinner discussing what might go into this family charter: principles of equality, respect, transparency, and inclusion. Everyone contributed ideas, even the usually quiet spouses who had always remained on the periphery of family decisions. There was an energy in the conversation that felt unprecedented in our family gatherings, collaborative rather than competitive, forward-looking rather than mired in past patterns. After dessert, as we lingered over coffee and digestives, Uncle Richard asked for everyone's attention. "I'd like to say something, if I may." He stood with some effort, still nursing his back injury. "This week has been illuminating for me, in ways both uncomfortable and necessary." The table fell silent, all eyes on the man who had dominated family dynamics for so long. Ethan's decision to put Linda and me in the garage was, as I now understand, a deliberate parallel to how we treated him and Diane years ago. He glanced at my mom apologetically. At first, I was indignant. How dare he? But as the week progressed, I've come to see it as the wake-up call it was intended to be. He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. I've always prided myself on being the family patriarch, the responsible one who kept us all connected, who provided opportunities for us to gather. But I see now that I confused control with responsibility, status with love. His candor surprised me. Uncle Richard had always been more concerned with appearances than authenticity. I'm not proud of how I've conducted myself, both this week and in years past. But I am proud of what Ethan is proposing, a new model for our family based on genuine equality and mutual respect. He raised his glass toward me. "Thank you for not giving up on us, even when you had every reason to." The sincerity in his voice moved me more than I expected. I nodded in acknowledgement, not trusting myself to speak. As the evening wound down and families began to drift back to the house, Travis pulled me aside. "That was quite a moment with my dad," he said. "I've never heard him admit he was wrong. About anything, ever." "People can surprise you," I replied. "They can indeed." He glanced back at the dinner table where Uncle Richard was deep in conversation with my mom. 20 years ago, if someone had told me we'd be standing here on your Malibu beach property, with my father apologizing and you buying a family compound, I'd have said they were delusional. I laughed. Life takes unexpected turns. That it does, garage boy. He caught himself. "Sorry, old habit, I shouldn't—" "It's okay," I interrupted. "Maybe it's time to reclaim that nickname. After all, the garage boy did pretty well for himself." Travis smiled. He certainly did. The next morning, our final day together, was a flurry of packing, goodbyes, and plans for the future. Families would be departing throughout the day for various flights back home. As each group prepared to leave, there were heartfelt embraces and promises to stay in touch that felt more genuine than ever before. Uncle Richard and Aunt Linda, who had the earliest departure, sought me out in my office where I was handling some work emails before the day's farewells. "Ethan," Uncle Richard began, "before we go, there's something we want to give you." He handed me a small, wrapped package. Inside was a vintage photo in a silver frame, my grandparents on their wedding day, young and radiant with happiness. This has always hung in our living room, Aunt Linda explained. But we both feel it belongs with you now, especially given your plans for the new family property. I was touched by the gesture. The photo was one of the few images I had of my grandparents in their youth, before the family fractured into hierarchies of worth and status. Thank you, I said sincerely. This means a lot to me. There's something else, Uncle Richard added, looking somewhat uncomfortable. It's about your father. My interest was immediately piqued. As I'd mentioned to Uncle Richard during his recovery, my family rarely spoke about my dad. What about him? I recently got a call from an old colleague in Nashville. Apparently, Alex has been asking about you. He saw the Forbes article, too. This was unexpected news. I hadn't heard from my father since a brief, awkward meeting when I was 16, a meeting that had only reinforced his absence in my life. What did he want? I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral. To reconnect, according to my friend. He's sober now and has been for several years. He's teaching music at a community college in Tennessee. I absorbed this information, unsure how to feel about it. Why are you telling me this now? Uncle Richard hesitated. Because I realized something this week. When your father left, I saw it as a confirmation of my judgment, that he was irresponsible, unreliable. I used that to justify how I treated you and your mother, as if his failures somehow diminished your worth in the family. He met my gaze directly. That was wrong of me. And keeping you separated from him, discouraging any contact, speaking poorly of him whenever he was mentioned, that was wrong too. Family is family, even the complicated, messy parts. It was a lot to process. I had long ago made peace with my father's absence, or at least I thought I had. The possibility of him wanting to reconnect now after all these years stirred complicated emotions. I'm not suggesting you should reach out, Uncle Richard clarified. That's entirely your decision. I just thought you should know. I nodded, appreciating his directness. Thank you for telling me. After they left, I sat for a long time staring at the photograph of my grandparents, thinking about family legacy, what we inherit, what we reject, what we transform. My grandfather had been, by all accounts, a kind but distant man, focused on business success above all else. My grandmother, the peacemaker who smoothed over family conflicts without ever really resolving them. And here was their grandson, trying to chart a different course. The rest of the day passed in a blur of departures. By late afternoon, only my mom remained, her flight scheduled for the following morning. We sat together on the deck, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. So, she said, sipping her tea, what do you think? Was the reunion a success? I considered the question carefully. It was different than I expected. I came in looking for vindication, maybe even revenge. I'm leaving with hope. She nodded, thoughtfully. Hope is good. Just remember that people don't change overnight. There will be backsliding, old patterns trying to reassert themselves. I know. That's why the structure is important. The trust, the charter, the room rotation. It's not about trusting everyone to suddenly be different. It's about creating a system that encourages better behavior. My pragmatic businessman, she said with a smile, always thinking in systems and incentives. I learned from the best, I replied, bumping her shoulder affectionately. You were the one who taught me to look for practical solutions rather than just complaining about problems. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the waves roll in as the sky darkened. Uncle Richard told me something interesting before he left, I finally said. Apparently, Dad has been asking about me. He saw the Forbes piece. My mom's expression remained carefully neutral. How do you feel about that? Confused, mostly. It's been so long. I'm not the same person I was the last time I saw him, and he's probably not the same either. Do you want to see him again? I shrugged. I don't know. Part of me is curious. Another part thinks it's too late. Whatever relationship we might have had has long since expired. She reached over and squeezed my hand. There's no right answer, Ethan. Whatever you decide, I'll support you. Just like you've always supported me. Her unconditional backing, as constant as the tide washing against the shore below us, was something I had always taken for granted. But after a week of examining family dynamics and histories, I saw it with new appreciation. Thank you, I said simply, for everything. The next morning, as I drove my mom to the airport, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know what I keep thinking about? That garage in Wisconsin. What about it? If we hadn't been put there, if the family had treated us differently, you might never have developed that fierce determination to prove yourself. You might not be who you are today. I considered this as we navigated the coastal highway. Maybe, but I'd like to think I would have found my path regardless. Of course you would have, she agreed. But perhaps not this exact path, with all its particular successes and lessons. It was a perspective I hadn't fully considered, that the very rejection that had hurt us had also, in some paradoxical way, helped shape my character and drive. Are you saying we should be grateful for the garage? I asked, half joking. She laughed. Not grateful, no. Just aware that our stories are complex. Even the painful chapters contribute to who we become. At the departure's drop-off, I helped her with her luggage and gave her a long hug. I'll call you when I land, she promised. I know you will. And I'll keep you updated on the property purchase. As I watched her walk into the terminal, I felt a profound sense of closure mixed with a new beginning. The Mitchell family reunion had started as my carefully orchestrated revenge plot and ended as something entirely different, a genuine opportunity for healing and transformation. Driving back to my empty house, I reflected on the journey from garage boy to tech entrepreneur, from wounded child to adult capable of breaking cycles of hurt. The beach house that had begun as a symbol of my success, proof that I had surpassed those who once looked down on me, now represented something more meaningful, a chance to build the kind of family I had always wanted to belong to. And maybe that was the most satisfying revenge of all, not making others suffer as I had suffered, but creating something better than what had hurt me. Not sleeping in garages, but building homes where everyone had a place. 3 years later, the Mitchell family estate glowed with celebration lights as I pulled up the long, winding driveway. It was our third annual summer reunion since the property had been purchased, and the changes in both the estate and our family dynamics were remarkable to witness. What had once been a beautiful but somewhat neglected property had transformed into a true family haven. Each year brought new improvements, some practical, some purely for enjoyment. The infinity pool had been renovated with a gradual entry area for the youngest children. The treehouse had expanded into an elaborate wooden playground structure that was the envy of the neighborhood. The main kitchen had been redesigned to accommodate multiple cooks working simultaneously, a necessity given how cooking together had become one of our favorite family activities. As I parked and gathered my bags, I heard cheerful voices from the back gardens. Walking around the side of the main house, I found a lively scene. Amber's twins, now 10 years old, were helping my mom plant flowers in the butterfly garden they had designed together. Travis's teenage daughter, Haley, was teaching her younger cousins how to set up the volleyball net on the lawn. Uncle Peter and Aunt Jessica were arranging chairs for the evening's outdoor movie screening. "Ethan's here," someone called out, and heads turned in my direction. The welcomes were warm and genuine, free of the awkward formality that had characterized family gatherings in the past. My mom abandoned her gardening gloves and hurried over to greet me with a tight hug. "You're finally here. How was the drive up?" "Not bad," I replied, returning her embrace. "The coastal road is always worth the extra time." She stepped back, studying my face with the perceptiveness only a mother possesses. "You look tired. Is everything okay with the new product launch?" "Just the usual pre-launch stress. Nothing a week of family chaos won't cure." We walked together toward the main house, my mom filling me in on who had arrived and the week's planned activities. This year's reunion had a theme: Mitchell Family Olympics, complete with team competitions, medals, and a closing ceremony. It had been Uncle Richard's idea, surprisingly enough. Speaking of Uncle Richard, I found him in the main kitchen arranging platters of appetizers. The sight still surprised me sometimes. The once imperious patriarch of the family, now happily performing tasks he would have previously considered beneath his dignity. "Ethan!" he called out, wiping his hands on a dish. "Sure, so just in time, I'll try this ceviche and tell me if it needs more lime." I accepted the offered spoonful, considering the flavors. "It's perfect. When did you become a ceviche expert?" "I've been taking cooking classes," he admitted with a slightly embarrassed smile. "After I finally fully retired last year, Linda insisted I needed a hobby that didn't involve checking the stock market every 5 minutes. Retirement had softened Uncle Richard in ways I wouldn't have believed possible. Without the pressure of maintaining his status as a successful surgeon and family provider, he had discovered interests and qualities that had been suppressed for decades. "It's really good," I assured him. "Save some for the welcome dinner." As I made my way through the house to my assigned room for the week, the blue room in the main house, middle tier in our 3-tier rotation system, I encountered more family members. Each interaction was natural and pleasant, marked by genuine interest rather than the superficial pleasantries of the past. After settling in and unpacking, I returned to the main living area to find a new arrival. My father, Alex, standing somewhat awkwardly in the entryway with his guitar case and a small suitcase. Our relationship had evolved cautiously but steadily since our first reunion dinner 3 years ago. We would never have the typical father-son bond that develops from a lifetime of shared experiences, but we had found a connection based on mutual respect and careful navigation of our complicated history. "Alex," I greeted him, extending my hand. "Glad you could make it." He shook my hand warmly. "Wouldn't miss it. Thanks for including me again this year." His inclusion in the family reunion had been a gradual process. The first year after our reconnection, he had come for just 2 days as my personal guest. Last year, he stayed for half the week. This year, he was joining for the full reunion, a sign of both his integration into the family and my growing comfort with his presence. "You're in the garden cottage this year," I told him. "I can show you the way." As we walked across the grounds to the smaller guest cottage, we chatted about his music teaching and my latest business ventures. There was still a certain carefulness in our conversations, but it was no longer awkward. "Your Aunt Catherine reached out to me last month," he mentioned as we approached the cottage. "She wanted to contribute some instruments to the music program at my community college. Said she remembered how much music meant to me back in the day. This was news to me." "That was thoughtful of her." He nodded, looking slightly bemused. The Mitchell family I remember from 30 years ago, and the one I'm getting to know now, seem like entirely different groups of people. "In many ways, we are," I replied, "though the transformation didn't happen overnight." At the cottage door, he paused. "I know I've said this before, but thank you, Ethan, for giving me a chance to be part of your life, even after all these years, and for creating this." He gestured around at the property, but I knew he meant more than just the physical space, this new version of the family. "You're welcome," I said simply, feeling the weight of all that remained unspoken between us. The years of absence, the childhood milestones missed, the relationship we might have had, but also the possibilities that still remained, limited though they might be. That evening, the entire family gathered for the traditional welcome dinner. The main dining table had been extended out onto the deck to accommodate everyone. 28 people this year, with the addition of new partners and children. The setting sun cast a golden glow over the gathering, the ocean providing a stunning backdrop. As had become our custom, dinner began with toasts and expressions of gratitude. What had once been perfunctory social niceties had evolved into thoughtful reflections on our journey as a family. "I'd like to propose a toast," said Aunt Catherine, rising from her seat with a wine glass in hand. "To growth and second chances." "To growth and second chances," everyone echoed. 3 years ago, when we gathered at Ethan's Malibu house, I don't think any of us truly understood what was possible for this family, she continued. We were stuck in old patterns, old resentments, old hierarchies that no longer served any of us. She gestured around the table. Look at us now. Richard cooks gourmet appetizers. Diane travels the world between teaching semesters. Alex shares his musical talents with all our children. Megan has started her own business with support from the family fund. And most importantly, our children are growing up with a completely different understanding of what family means than what we experienced. Her words resonated around the table, prompting nods and murmurs of agreement. So here's to letting go of who we thought we had to be, and embracing who we actually are, she concluded. And to Ethan, who showed us it was possible. As glasses clinked and conversations resumed, Travis leaned over to me. Remember when Catherine barely spoke at family gatherings? Richard would just talk over her whenever she tried. I nodded, recalling the dynamics of our past reunions. She's found her voice. We all have in different ways, he observed. Even me, the former jerk cousin who called you garage boy. Former being the operative word, I assured him. Travis had become one of my closest allies in maintaining the new family culture, often being the first to call out any slippage into old patterns of behavior. After dinner, as families dispersed to various activities, a card game for the adults in the living room, a bonfire for the teenagers on the beach, a movie for the younger children in the media room, I found myself drawn to the quiet of the gardens. The Mitchell family estate was large enough that even with 28 people in residence, it was possible to find moments of solitude. I sat on a stone bench beside the koi pond, listening to the gentle splash of the small waterfall and watching the fish glide beneath the water's surface. The path that had led me here still seemed remarkable, from the angry young man plotting revenge in his Malibu beach house to the creator and guardian of a new family legacy. Mind if I join you? I looked up to see Megan approaching through the garden path. Of all my cousins, she had undergone perhaps the most profound transformation. After her divorce 3 years ago, she had struggled to redefine herself outside of her identity as a doctor's wife and perfect suburban mother. The family had rallied around her in ways that would have been unimaginable in the past. Please, I said, gesturing to the space beside me. She sat down, drawing her light cardigan around her against the evening breeze. I needed a few minutes of quiet. The good kind of overwhelms, but still overwhelms. I know exactly what you mean, I replied. How's the business going? After years of suppressing her creative talents to support her husband's career, Megan had launched a successful interior design business. The Mitchell Family Fund had provided her initial capital, and several family members had been her first clients. Better than I ever expected, she admitted. I just signed my biggest commercial project yet, redesigning the lobby and executive offices for Westridge Financial. That's fantastic, Megan. Congratulations, she smiled, her confidence a stark contrast to the brittle perfectionism she had once projected. What about you? I heard through the family grapevine that you might be considering a step back from day-to-day operations at your company. I nodded, still getting used to the idea myself. I'm promoting my COO to CEO at the end of the year. I'll stay on as executive chairman, but with more flexibility to pursue other interests. Such as, I'm launching a foundation focused on educational equity, helping kids from disadvantaged backgrounds access technology education and careers. and maybe writing a book about startup culture. Plus, I'd like to have more time for a personal life. She raised an eyebrow. Does this have anything to do with the environmental lawyer you brought to Christmas last year? What was her name? Nadia? Possibly, I admitted with a smile. Nadia and I had been dating for over a year, taking things slowly but steadily growing, more serious. She's flying in on Wednesday to join us for the second half of the reunion. I'm happy for you, Ethan, and proud of you, though I know that might sound condescending coming from a cousin who didn't always treat you well. Not condescending. At all, I assured her. We're all proud of each other these days. That's part of what makes this work. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the koi and listening to the distant sounds of family laughter drifting from various parts of the estate. Do you ever think about how different things might have been? Megan asked finally. If you hadn't put Uncle Richard in that garage, if you'd just let the old patterns continue? I had considered this question many times over the years. I think about it often, not with regret, but with a kind of amazed gratitude that something that started as revenge turned into this. Revenge was definitely deserved, she acknowledged. But this is so much better. Agreed. Though I'll admit, seeing Uncle Richard's face when he realized he was sleeping in the garage will remain one of my favorite memories. We both laughed, the shared joke possible only because of how far we had all come. As the week progressed, the Mitchell Family Olympics unfolded with much hilarity and good-natured competition. Teams had been carefully structured to include members from different branches of the family, further reinforcing our interconnectedness rather than our separate units. On our fourth evening, after a particularly spirited day of competition that had included everything from a sandcastle contest to a family trivia challenge, we gathered for a special dinner to honor my mom's 60th birthday. She had requested a simple celebration, but the family had other ideas. The long table was decorated with her favorite flowers, candles casting a warm glow as twilight descended. Chef Antonio had returned to prepare her favorite meal. Wine flowed freely as we celebrated not just her birth, but her role as the quiet strength that had helped reshape our family. I'd like to say something, my mom said, standing as dessert was being served. Normally reticent in group settings, she had grown more comfortable expressing herself as the family dynamic shifted. Looking around this table, I see something I never thought possible when Ethan was growing up. She paused, gathering her thoughts. For many years, I felt like an outsider in this family, the struggling single mother who had made the wrong choices, whose place was in the garage or the basement or wherever space could be found. Uncle Richard looked down at his plate, the reminder of past behaviors still difficult for him to hear. I accepted that treatment, she continued, partly because I didn't feel I deserved better, and partly because I didn't know how to challenge it. But watching Ethan refuse to accept that same treatment, not just for himself, but ultimately for all of us, changed everything. She gestured around the table. This isn't just a nicer venue for the same old dynamics. This is a completely reimagined version of what family can be, where everyone has value, where mistakes are acknowledged and forgiven, where differences are respected rather than ranked. She raised her glass. So, on my 60th birthday, my wish is that what we've built here continues to grow and strengthen, not just for us, but for our children and grandchildren. That they inherit a family legacy of inclusion rather than exclusion, of support rather than judgment. To Mom, I said, standing to join her toast. The heart of our family. To Diane, echoed around the table as glasses were raised. Later that night, as the celebration wound down and families began drifting toward their respective accommodations, I found myself on the main deck with Uncle Richard. We had developed an unlikely friendship over the past 3 years, built on honest conversations about the past and a shared commitment to the family's future. Your mother's speech tonight really hit home, he said, gazing out at the moonlit ocean. I've apologized to both of you many times. but I'm not sure I ever fully grasped the impact of how I treated you until hearing her describe it tonight. It was a long time ago, I replied, and we've all moved beyond it. Have we? Or have we just transformed it into something better? He turned to look at me directly. You could have used your success to cut ties with the family completely. Many people would have. Instead, you forced us to confront our failures, and then offered us a path to redemption. I considered his words. I don't think of it as redemption. Exactly. More like evolution. We all needed to evolve. Me included. How so? You were the wronged party. I needed to evolve beyond anger and resentment, I explained, to see that perpetuating the cycle of hurt, even if justified, wouldn't bring me peace. That true power comes from creation, not retribution. Uncle Richard nodded slowly. That's a wisdom many never achieve, regardless of their success in other areas. He checked his watch. I should head to bed. Linda and I are referees for the egg and spoon race tomorrow morning, and I've been warned there will be harsh penalties for favoritism. We both chuckled at the thought of Uncle Richard, once the unchallenged arbiter of family hierarchy, now carefully ensuring fairness in a children's game. As I prepared for bed that night in my assigned room, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The garage boy who had grown up to build a tech empire, the wounded child who had planned an elaborate revenge, only to discover a deeper form of justice. The family that had transformed from a rigid hierarchy to a community of equals. The Mitchell family estate wasn't just a property, it was a physical manifestation of what was possible when old wounds were acknowledged, when authentic apologies were offered and accepted, when people committed to doing better than what had been done to them. I thought about the family charter that hung framed in the main entryway, its carefully crafted principles guiding our interactions. I thought about the education fund that had already helped 3 young Mitchells attend college without financial strain. I thought about my father, tentatively finding his place in the family he had once abandoned. Most of all, I thought about the next generation, Amber's twins, Travis's teenagers, Megan's children, and all the others. They would grow up with a completely different understanding of family than what I had experienced. For them, family would mean support without conditions, love without ranking, belonging without having to earn it. As I drifted toward sleep, I realized that creating this legacy was the most meaningful thing I had ever done, more significant than my business success, more lasting than any material possessions. From the painful experience of being made to sleep in a garage had emerged a determination not just to succeed, but to transform. Not just to prove my worth, but to create a place where no one's worth would ever be questioned again. The garage boy had built not just a beach house, but a home. Not just for himself, but for all of us. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.